Aloha class, I wanted to go into how we're going to calculate our predetermined overhead rate. So remember, we're using estimates at the beginning of the period to come up with a predetermined overhead rate. So the beginning of the period, we have this estimate of predetermined overhead rate, and then while we produce jobs, we'll use actual hours, right? So we'll times our predetermined overhead rate by the actual hours that we use for specific jobs, and then at the end we'll determine how much we applied to a job, which is the predetermined overhead rate, times it by the actual hours, versus how much we actually used, the actual versus the applied. And usually we're off. We're not going to be perfect every time, so we'll be under applied or over applied. But manufacturing overhead is applied to jobs, right? There's different allocation bases. There could be direct labor hours, direct labor dollars, or machine hours, right? But it's impossible or difficult to trace overhead costs to a particular job. Remember, we have those indirect costs, like cleaning supplies or lubricants, right? Indirect labor, like this production manager's salary, and many types of manufacturing overhead costs are fixed, even though output fluctuates during the period. We also have things like rent for the factory, or depreciation could be manufacturing overhead. Again, sometimes it's hard to measure, right, this indirect materials, so we estimate how much overhead we charge to a job as we work on the job, right? We're estimating how much we're going to use, and we use a predetermined overhead rate. Again, we're using a predetermined overhead rate, and how we apply it to a job is by using a predetermined overhead rate. So this is your formula, right? Your predetermined overhead rate equals 3 divided by 2. 3 is the total manufacturing cost. Always put it in the numerator. Total dollar amount divided by the estimated total amount of allocation base for the period. So they have to tell you what your allocation base is. You know, we determine our overhead by direct labor hours, right? And so if it's by direct labor hours, that would be your allocation base. So you would divide it by the hours, direct labor hours needed for all of the production. So again, dollars divided by allocation base, which is a lot of the time hours, machine hours, or direct labor hours, things like that. So this is a little bit about predetermined overhead rate. Remember, they're both estimates at the beginning of the period.